What you're seeing, what you should be seeing on the screen right now is Final Cut Pro 10 as it will appear when you first open the program and you've really never used it before. Okay, with the exception of a couple different things, but it's not important. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to take the last 45 minutes of this segment and walk you through what you're seeing here on the screen. Just so you have and this is what I spent 3 days doing. No video clips, just kind of going through and studying each of these functions and what they're all about, all right? So, even though it looks complicated, we're really only dealing with 3 windows here. This window up top, including this little sidebar, right now is just called the event library, all right? Where my mouse is here in this lighter gray area, this will eventually become the event browser. This is where our media, we will see our media, all right? The clips that we bring into our events. The event library is where our events are stored, okay? You see here I have 2 hard drives. Mac HD is the main system hard drive. This is where the application itself is being run and operated from. We don't store our media on this drive. There will never be events on this drive. By default, if I just tree this down, Final Cut's going to automatically create 1 event on here. Why? Final Cut's a diva. It has to have at least 1 event on the root hard drive, okay? I don't know why. It's just the way, because you know what it is? It wants us, if we go in, if I come out of here into Finder and I click on Mac HD and I go into my users movies folder, it wants to have a Final Cut events folder there by default. All right? Notice how there's no Final Cut projects folder. Well, we haven't created any projects yet. That's why it's not there. But by default, if you just tree down your Mac HD, there'll always be an event. And the way the program's configured right now, it's naming the events, new event, and then the date. All right? So we don't need to worry about that right now. Where I'm going to be creating events and working with media is on my work drive. This is where I have all of my media. So if I were just to click the root hard drive here, where it says work drive, all of the media that I have on this drive, let me just zoom out here so we can see all the clips in full. All of the media is just showing me every clip, every video, every audio clip, every graphics file that's on the hard drive. Okay? If I tree down this, we'll see all the different events that I have on the hard drive. Now I have 5 events here. Each one of these holds media pertinent to that event. Okay? So again, just to reiterate, events are where we store media. This is where our media is stored. All right? So the event library keeps track of all that. If I were to connect another hard drive to this computer that has media on it, right away Final Cut would populate that drive into this event library, and I could click it, and it would show me all the media on that drive. Okay? So we have the event library, and we have the event browser. I'm going to move down here into this bottom window, the bigger window down here. Right now, in the state that you're seeing, this window is called the project library. It's very much the same thing as the event library. This is just dealing with projects. Now, what are projects? Anybody? Timelines. Good. That's the best way to put it, because it can be confusing to say, well, projects, well, isn't the whole thing a project? Yeah, you could say that. I'm working on this project. But yeah, projects are timelines, okay? So if I were to click on work drive here, doesn't show me anything. I have to tree it down. And then what I've done is I've created folders, but if you, by default you wouldn't see folders, you would just see projects like this, okay? And these are all different timelines that are using media. It's media that I've edited from my events, okay? I like to keep my events named the same thing as my timelines that are associated with it. Okay, it just lets it be a little bit more organized for me, helps me to keep track of things a little bit better. But these are projects, and now we're in the project library, and it's just showing me all the projects that I have on my media drive. Now I can just click one of these, and I can just scrub my mouse over this, and it's actually kind of cool. I can review what's on the timeline just by running my mouse over it. This is called skimming. All right, skimming is one of the is a very powerful feature in Final Cut Pro 10. It allows me to just run my mouse. I'm not clicking, just running my mouse over video or media, and it's showing me in this window up here what it is I'm seeing. And I can click on any of these and just kind of see what they are. All right? So we have lots of different projects. These are the projects we're going to be working with over the course of this program. And we're going to talk about new events and new projects too. All right? So our project library is located down here. I do have these sorted up into folders, which you can just create by coming down here, clicking on New Folder, and then dropping the project into it. I just want to open up one of these real quick and just show you the second stage of this window. If I just take one of these projects and double-click it, it opens it up. Now we are viewing the project browser or the timeline. Okay, this is the timeline. So now we're seeing what we're doing with our media from our event down here. Okay, so this is just a timeline. You can see I have some video clips on here. And again, I'm just running my mouse over and skimming. Very basic stuff, all right? So let's talk about this window a little bit more. If I come back down here to the bottom, this little movie reel type thing, and if I just zoom in here, you'll be able to see a little bit better. This little movie reel thing here, if I click that, it's just going to bring me back out to my project library. All right, so if you need to get back to this whole list right here, just click on that little reel. It'll take you right back. Down here on the bottom, next to the little reel thingy, we have another little icon. This is the timeline index. And I'm not going to get too much into this yet, but I just want to show you what it is. If I click this, it opens up a dialog here on the left-hand side. And in this panel, it's basically a list representation of all the clips in my timeline. So you'll see if I click on a clip here, and you look over here to the left, it's actually going to show you where that clip is and its position time code on the timeline. All right. There's a lot more that goes into this window. We're just scratching the surface. I'm not going to go into that a whole lot yet. But that's how you'd access the timeline index. Elsewhere in this window, we have a scroll bar down here on the bottom. This allows us to navigate our timeline. Alternately, I'm using a wheel mouse here. If you have a magic mouse, you can just run one finger over the top. If I just run one finger over the top, I can navigate laterally or up and down on my timeline. Just an easy way of navigating the timeline. Over here on the bottom right-hand side are zoom controls. So I can simply just, let me zoom out a little bit. I can simply just drag the slider and zoom out or zoom into my video clips or any media I have on the timeline. Very helpful. This can also be accomplished by using the zoom tool. By clicking Z on the keyboard and just zooming in. You can do that, or we can click to zoom in, or we can use keystrokes. There's all different ways to do this. Just depends on your comfort level. We're not going to get too far into that right now.
Feel free to throw out your favorite method in the
chat room. Yep, it all just, it's all personal preference when it comes to that. One great thing I love is if I'm zoomed all the way into my timeline here and I'm looking at my clips and this film strip view is really close up, I can just hit Shift Z. It will fit all the contents of my timeline to the window. All right. So if I'm zoomed in here, again, let's go all the way in, or slide in, however we want to do this. And I just want to back out so I can see my entire timeline, Shift Z. I'm going to use that a lot throughout this program, so you'll really see when we get into more complex timelines how I'm navigating around quickly. And that's the key to working fast and efficiently on this timeline. All right. The last thing over here in the project timeline, if I zoom in, down here on the bottom is a little switch icon. You're going to find this little switch icon in all of our major windows, and I'm going to cover those in a little bit more depth in a second here. But if I click that little icon, it's going to bring up some clip appearance options here. Now I can choose how I want my clips to look. If I want to see my video clips, and let me Shift Z out again so I can see them. All right. If I just want to view them as audio only, and I've disabled the audio on these clips so you're not really seeing the waveforms here, I can click this one. This next one here is going to give me small thumbnails of video images. The next one is going to give me larger ones. This next one's going to kind of give me a 50-50 representation. It's going to give me a nice split between the audio and video. This one's going to give me all video thumbnails, and then this final one over here is giving me just a clip, a line representation of my clips. Okay, so clip appearances, depending on what you're doing in the timeline, can be helpful to kind of give you a better visual reference of what you're doing. We can also adjust the clip height just by selecting the timeline and then dragging a slider, which will resize these however we want it to view them. So if I want larger clips, I would just size it up. If I want smaller clips, I could just size it down. Okay. Connections, you see a little box here that says Show Connections. Connections, if I'm just going to demonstrate this real quick, if I drag a clip up and put it on top of something, this little line right here is a connector. Okay, it's just telling me that this clip is connected to this clip. We'll get into more of that later. We're not going to touch that at this current moment in time. Okay? But you can toggle that on and off whether or not you want to see the connections by clicking that button. Okay? And down here on the bottom, we can determine how we want Final Cut Pro 10 to display the names of our clips. So we can see just the clip name, or if we have other metadata applied to our clips, we can view those by selecting these options down here. Okay, so now that you've seen the switch in the project timeline window, I want to come back up here to the event browser, and I just want to open up a little bit of media in here. All right, we'll just grab something here. Here we go. And I have a slider down here on the bottom, which will allow me to see more of each of these clips. You'll notice that these video clips are all separated, in a box. They're all just each one clip is one box. Well, that's giving me a representation of a very long clip. So, I might be looking at a clip here that might be several minutes in duration, but that's going to make it hard for me to go through in a very accurate scale to really get in there and see what each frame is doing, or what just the second is opposed to a couple minutes. So we can use this slider down here to kind of zoom in on our video clips, and it's just going to kind of give us more of a zoomed in thumbnail view. And you'll notice that if a clip continues on from one line to the next, you're going to get this jagged serrated edge. That just tells you there's more to that clip. So we can zoom in to increments of half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, all the way zoomed out until we're just seeing each individual clip as its own little item in there. There's a switch icon here that allows us to adjust the clip height, clip size in the event browser. And we can also toggle whether we want to see the audio waveforms or not. All right. So again, just trying to familiarize you guys with the different things here. We can also, in our event library, sort these clips in different methods. Okay. So if we want to see, instead of a thumbnail view or a film strip view, we can click this button. It'll give us a list view of all of our media located in the event browser. Okay, and I can just toggle through those, and you see a film strip representation of it up here. Toggle back to film strip mode right here, or icon mode. Over here in this little gearbox, we can now group our events over here in the event library by certain parameters. We can group them, which we have them grouped right now, is by disk. So we're viewing them by hard disk, which is these right here. Okay. We can also group them by date if you want to. We can show date ranges, so if you had an event that was created over several days, you kept importing media over time, it'll show you ranges. And we can also group our clips in different methods too. We can group these clips in the event browser by all these different parameters if we have real numbers assigned to them, or scene designations, or just by the length of the duration of the clips. I like to keep mine set by file type. And the reason I like this, because you'll see up here it says QuickTime Movie, waveform audio, PNGs. This gives me a visual representation of all the different types of files that I'm working with in my event. And this just helps me at a glance to know, okay, well, I just want to see my video clips. Boom, I can knock this down, and now I'm just looking at my QuickTime movies. All right? Or if I just want to look at audio clips that don't have video associated with them, there they are. Final Cut Pro 10 is so powerful with organization, and this is just scratching the surface. All right? But we can adjust different filtering options right here in this dialog. This little doohickey button right here on the side just toggles whether or not we want to see the event library. Very simple. Okay? So we've covered the event library, the event browser, and let me show you one more cool thing in here while we're at it. If I'm working with clips here in my event browser, I can see them over here in the project window or the viewer. If I'm down here on the timeline and I really want to kind of see what I'm doing down here and work with video clips up here, you'll notice that it will toggle back and forth, which is nice. But there's one more thing we can do. We can enable the event viewer. And that's going to open a second window for us. And this is very much like a traditional video editing program, where we now have a 2-up display. And this now lets me view my video clips here in my event browser while also seeing the current frame in the project viewer. All right? Just nice. It's just nice to have that option. It's a new option. It came with the 10.0.6 update. It's just a nice thing to have. All right, so I'm just going to hide the event viewer at this moment. And that covers 2 out of the main 3 windows that we're working with right here. The last thing we're going to talk about over here on the right-hand side, this is our project viewer. This is our main timeline viewer. This is going to show us what we're doing down here in our timeline window. Okay, so you see I have 3 video clips here, and I'm skimming across them, and you're seeing that represented up here in the project viewer. If I want to play back video down here on the timeline, I simply hit the space bar. Okay, it's going to play back my video, and you're going to see when one video clip ends and another one starts, it makes a cut. Same thing right here, cuts. Okay, very simple stuff. I know a lot of you are going, we get it. But it really is kind of important to see it all laid out in front of you so you have an idea, and especially for people who are new to the program, you can get a sense of how things operate, okay? There's some sub-buttons up here in the project viewer. We have a play button here, which basically does the exact same thing as if I were to hit the space bar. It's just going to play back my video. If I click that, it's going to play back my video. These 2 buttons right here represent previous edit and next edit. So I can click either of these buttons, and it'll take me. You'll notice at the playhead here, which, by the way, I should probably label this. This is called the playhead. This red line that you're seeing is the playhead. This is the playhead stopper. So this is basically telling me at what moment in time am I viewing, and the skimmer playhead is just sort of skimming through and showing me the frame that I'm representing by skimming. Okay? So you'll notice that the playhead will move when I click Previous Edit and Next Edit, just by clicking these buttons. We can also accomplish this down here in the timeline window by pressing up and down on our arrow keys on the keyboard. All right? So I'm basically just pressing up and down and navigating to each of my different cuts here. Okay? So what else do we have in this window of the project viewer? We have this little neat button over here that kind of looks like an architectural icon. That is the crop button, and we have 3 different functions located here in this dialog. We have a crop feature, which allows us to crop our image in several different ways. We have a transform option that allows us to do scaling and moving of our video clips, and I'm just going to use Command-Z to undo. And then we also have a distort feature, which allows us to do kind of 3D distortions and just skewing of our video clips. All right, we can disable those just by clicking them on and off. And then finally over here on the right lower side, we have a full screen button. So if I wanted to play this video full screen, I don't have to start playing it and then hit the full screen button. I can just hit the full screen button, and it will play my video back in full screen. Okay, good stuff to have. All right, so up here on the top, last things, we have a percentage dialog here that'll just show us what percentage we want to view our timeline viewer window at, or project viewer. We can just zoom that in however we want. I like to keep it on fit. Just fits it to the size of the window. I can resize my windows and it will size with it. Very, very handy. Okay. And you know what I really like about this program? Legacy version of Final Cut 7, all of these different windows were independently floated. So you can close one and the other ones would still be there. And it would get crazy sometimes if you had a lot of different timelines open and you lose one and you'd have to go into Finder and go searching for it and then re-maximize it. In this case, Final Cut Pro is one solid window. All right, so it'll just stay all in a nice little package there, which is really nice. Okay. Up here at the top, you'll notice we have another switch. This gives us some parameters to work with in our project viewer. If I drop this down, we have some options here for additional windows. On day 3, we are going to work heavily with video scopes. By clicking that first option, video scopes will open our video scopes window. What you're looking at here is a waveform monitor. There's all different types of video scopes. We're going to really get into depth in how to use those for color correcting and grading. All right, so I'm going to hide that. Come down here. Oh, and by the way, that can be accomplished by Command-7 on your keyboard will open your video scopes on and off, which is very helpful when you're actually doing color correcting and grading. We have a Show Angles button. This Show Angles dialog is for when we're working with multi-clips. If we're working with, if we have 4 or 5 different camera angles and we want to switch them live as they're playing back, the Show Angles dialog will open up a window and show us different, all the different camera angles that we have. Okay. Show both fields. This option right here, if you're shooting DSLR video or any of today's modern progressive frame formats, you won't really use. This is for interlaced video. Old 480 type video had an interlaced signal, and it doesn't really matter. You're never going to use it. Let's just put it that way. All right, so don't worry about that. It's probably something you're never going to use. We can view the different independent channels of our video here. View red only, green only, blue only, and they're represented by grayscale because that's how color channels are represented in visual form. We'll get into a little bit more of that later, but you can toggle those on and off there. And then we have this nifty little overlay feature here on the bottom called Show Title Action Safe Zones. And what that's going to give us is a 2-line overlay on our project viewer that shows us where action is safe on most broadcast TVs. Okay? Anybody here work in broadcast? Do anything cable work? Anything? If let's say you produce a video for cable, like a cable TV commercial, and you give it to them, you'd want to make sure that all of the action, the important action, happens within the boundaries of this outside box. Any titles or text that you put up on the screen, you'd want to keep inside the inner box. But this just gives us a visual reference of where things are in the frame. It's very useful. I kind of wish they had a grid display, which would tell us where the third of our image is, which would kind of give us an idea of how to frame things up and compose, which is nice. All right, so we basically just walked through the 3 main windows of the program. And I'm just going to kind of back out here and get to 0 in terms of just the look of it, because we're going to focus here on this middle bar. All right, we're going to focus our attention here to the toolbar. Call this the toolbar. Lots of different things happening here. The first thing you're going to notice, we're going to start over here on the left-hand side. This button right here looks like a film strip with a little arrow. This is our import media button, okay, there's a lot of different ways that Final Cut Pro 10 will allow you to import media. All right, we can click this button and it's going to open a dialog box that allows us to pull in media from our hard drives or many different sources. Okay, we're going to get into that in more depth in the next segment, but for right now, that toggles that on and off. We can also use Command Keyboard shortcut Command I to toggle the dialog. Down here on the bottom, or next to that, I should say. Let me just actually put some media here, just so you can kind of see these illuminated. These are ratings buttons, the little green star, the little stroke outline, and the X. These are ratings buttons. What these buttons allow us to do, and we'll get into this in more depth a little later, these allow us to rate our footage. This green star will let me assign a favorite tag to a clip. So let's say I like this portion of a clip. I really want to use this and save it for later. I can just highlight the portion of that clip, click this little green star. It'll put a green line on it just to mark it as a favorite. And then I can later on just view only my favorites. Okay? If I want to unrate something, so say I favored it and I want to unfavorite it, I could just click this little box. It will remove the rating from the selection. And this red X will allow me to reject a clip or portion of a clip. Now, the nice thing about this is it won't delete the clip. It'll just mark it as rejected. So let's say I have a shot of Vanessa and I want to use the first 3 seconds, but I really don't need the 3 other takes that were after that. I can just mark her best part as a favorite and just reject the rest if I wanted to. We'll get into more of that later. But these buttons are right here. There's also keyboard commands, shortcuts associated with this, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. This little key icon right here is a very, very powerful feature of Final Cut Pro 10. You will be using this a lot. This is the keyword editor. What this button does is bring up a dialog that allows us to assign tags and keywords to video clips, or any media for that matter. So we can sort and organize our media just by giving it a name, or a title, or just a keyword associated with the content. So this is a picture of, this is one of my editors, Axel. You're going to get to see my whole crew represented in some of this footage. It's kind of fun. This is Axel taking a water gun shot to the face. And if I wanted to say, okay, this is Axel, I could just type in the name Axel here, and it will assign that to the clip that I've selected. I actually had it on the wrong clip there. But basically, we'll get into this in more detail, but this is the keyword tag window. You can toggle that by clicking it on and off, or by keyboard shortcut Command K. Okay? All right, moving right along. Down here next to the keyword command, we have editing options. These 3 buttons all allow us different ways to bring media from our event browser down onto the project timeline. All right, we'll get into the functions of these later on, but these 3 buttons will allow you to do that. There's also options in here to bring down both video and audio together, video only or audio only. And when we get into bringing clips down onto our timeline for editing, we'll get into that as well. Okay, this little zoom icon right here is actually not just a zoom icon. If I open this panel, these are all the tools that we have at our disposal to work with in the project timeline, or anywhere actually in the event browser as well. Lots of different tools. We're going to go over each of them in detail later on. Here in the middle, there's actually 3 things happening in this window. This is the background tasks window. It's also a time code representation, and there's some audio meters in here. There's 3 different things happening. The first one on the left-hand side is a background tasks window toggle. This little progress meter here will actually give you a representation of what Final Cut Pro 10 is doing in the background. All right? So if it's rendering video, or if it's importing footage that you've asked it to import, or if it's transcoding media from one format to another, you're going to get a visual representation of that right here in the background tasks window. If I click it, you'll see we have several different options or several different displays in here. One for transcoding and analysis, importing media, media management, rendering and sharing. All kinds of stuff happens in the background of Final Cut Pro 10. That's where that will be shown and represented. In the middle here, we have a duration timeline or time code display. This shows me where I am in my timeline. If I were to open up one of these timelines like I had before, you'll see that as I skim my playhead through this footage, it's giving me a time numeral designation of where I am in the timeline. This is also pretty powerful because I can just type in a time here. If I type in 0615, it's going to bring me to that point in the timeline. If I type in 0100, it'll bring me to 1 second. So this is great if you have a client you've delivered a video to, right? And they say, at 8 seconds there's a problem. Well, I can just type in 0800, go to that, and it'll bring me right to that point. All right, pretty powerful stuff. Pretty standard for video editing programs. Nothing new to the world of video editing right there. All right. The last thing in this middle window are our audio meters. If I were to play back a clip that has some audio, these do not have audio, so let me go out to a clip that actually has some audio. You know what, I'll just play something back from right here. You can kind of see. You'll notice that as this plays back,
Sure it still is?
you're seeing a visual representation of our audio right here. That's pretty small. I wouldn't want to work with that for an actual sound mix. So if I just click it, it's going to open up a bigger representation right here.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, enough of the water balloon stuff. All right, so that's the middle part of the toolbar. Over here on the right-hand side, we have a lot of different stuff happening over here. And I'm just going to close my audio meters so we don't have those in the way. All right, so each of these performs a different function. And I'm just going to kind of breeze through these. This little magic wand tool with the little rainbow pixie dust, these are our automated features that Final Cut Pro 10 includes. Final Cut Pro 10 will color balance for you. It'll match color from one clip to another. It'll match audio from one clip to another. It'll do all these great things, matching clips to other clips and all these magical things. The problem is, half of them don't work very well. Okay? So you do have these options for balancing color, match color. So if let's say you have video clips that are really poorly color balanced, you can select them and click balance color, and Final Cut will actually balance the color for you. It'll be up to you to decide whether or not you're happy with the result. Okay? Generally, a lot of the times I'm not. So I do a lot of my color grading and stuff manually, so we'll get into that on day 3, but these are the options to do that here. We have this show color board option here. If I click this, you're going to notice something happen over here on the right-hand side. This color board has now opened. This is where we do all of our color correcting and color affecting in Final Cut Pro 10. Really powerful stuff. We're going to get into it in much depth, but I'm just going to toggle that off for now. Also in here, we have auto enhance audio and show audio enhancements. If I click that window, it's going to show me all the audio tools that we have to work with for a given audio clip. All right. Moving on. This window right here, this panel, is our retime panel. This panel will give us options for slowing down and speeding up video clips. Lots of different things happening here. We can make clips play in reverse. We can speed ramp them so they go from slow to fast or fast to slow. Lots of different things happening here. We'll touch on this a little bit later on. And then these 7 windows here, okay, these 7 icons are all part of one conglomerate called the media browser. Okay, lots of different things happening here. We have an effects panel. If I click this first one, it's going to show us all the built-in and plug-in effects that we've installed, both audio and video, in Final Cut Pro 10. This next window is our photo browser, and it likes to, this is an Apple product, so it likes to work with all the programs, iPhoto, iMovie, or iTunes. So what it's doing here is showing me all the photos that are in my iTunes library, all right, or anything that might have been taken within Photo Booth. So any photos that you have, and if you're using the format of organization, you can browse them here. The little musical icon will take us to iTunes. So if we want to import music directly from iTunes or video directly from iTunes and the movies, we can import them right from there. This is a transitions dialog. All the built-in, a lot of these are cheesy transitions. Transitions built into Final Cut Pro 10 can be found right here in this media browser. They're all broken down into categories as well. We have a titles browser. Final Cut Pro 10 is pretty cool. It gives you a lot of canned titles, sort of custom or just templated titles that we can work with and customize however we want. And these are all found in the titles browser, and we could just drag these onto our timeline and work with them later on. Kind of cool. The next tab is our generators browser, and this has some really useful features to it, which we'll probably explore a little later on. Final Cut Pro 10 comes with an extensive library of video generators and sound effects and all this kind of stuff, which, by the way, sound effects can be found in the music browser under sound effects. There's a couple different libraries in there. But our generators browser has some great things if we want to create shape masks and solids. And these are a little bit more advanced features, but they are useful nonetheless. And I like the generators browser because it has a lot of useful features in it. The last little tab in our media browser conglomerate is called the themes browser. Themes are all different types of graphics and full page graphics, lower thirds. Things that are meant to give things an overall theme. So if you wanted your video to have all a theme of, I don't know, this envelope here. It's got all different graphics that are related to that you can tie into that. I don't use any of this stuff, to be honest. I don't use any of the themes. That's sort of a canned look. It's not what that's not what I'm going for. But they're there nonetheless, and if you happen to click on it, that's what you're going to see if you open that. All right, so when we first opened the program, this window was not visible. But I'm going to toggle it for you right now because it's a very key window that we're going to be using a lot. It's called the inspector. All right. Our inspector window is the information source of everything that we're going to be working with in Final Cut Pro 10. It is a monumental piece of panel in the program, and we can just toggle it on and off by clicking the inspector window. What it's going to do in the inspector window is show me any information related to anything that I click anywhere in my project, events, or anything. So if I click on this one clip right here, for example, it's going to show me a video tab, an audio tab, an information tab, and a share tab. In the video tab, it's going to show me information related to video parameters, color, anything I've done to it. If I click one of these clips down here on my timeline, it's going to give me an option to open our color board. It's going to have options for transforming the clip, moving its position, scaling it up and down. All these different things are accomplished right here in the inspector window. There's also crop, stabilization, distort, rolling shutter. All these different things that we can do to our video clips can be found in the inspector window. We also have an audio tab that deals with volume, channel configuration. Any audio effects that we may apply to our video clip or audio clips can be dealt with and changed and have the parameters set here in the inspector window. One of the most powerful things about the inspector window is its ability to show you metadata. If I click on any given clip in our event browser and I click on info, it's going to give me a world of information about that video clip. And there's so many different views that we can choose to get as much information as we need. When you record a video clip on any, using any camcorder, DSLR, or camera, it's going to embed metadata. And metadata is just information that's attached to the clip that gives you information about that video clip. Well, the inspector window is going to tell you everything you need to know. It's going to tell you the duration, the codec of which it was encoded at. It's going to tell you if you assigned a camera name to it, what the camera name was, information about audio. It's going to tell you what format the video clip is in. And we haven't really talked about transcoded media yet. We're going to do that in the next segment, but it gives you information about that. It's going to tell you what clip, what event your clip is associated with. So if we have video clips down here on the timeline, we want to know what event that clip is stored in, because maybe we have multiple events like we do here. If I just click on this, it's going to tell me this video clip, Rob, is associated with the color correct and grade event. All right? Really powerful stuff, and I use the inspector window for most of the features, most of the functionality that I work with in Final Cut Pro 10. So that's the inspector window. I want to pause because I just bombarded people with information.
Yeah, we're going to have two different types of audiences right now. Audiences that know and are familiar with all this stuff and are itching to get to the next section, and then ones where that was just a crazy amount of information to grasp and are going to probably want to go rewatch that. But yeah, now will probably be a good time to pause for some questions.
Yeah, dude. Let's take some general questions. Yeah.
A question from Joey Bordelon about fusion drives. Says, what is Rob's thought on fusion drives? Should you break the drives apart to have two separate drives or leave them fused?
That's all personal preference, man. He's talking about RAID configurations and drives that are linked for speed or redundancy. I like a RAID 0 or a RAID 5 configuration. If you're not following me, don't worry. It basically just, you can configure hard drives that have, like, let's say you have an enclosure and it has multiple hard drives in it. You can stripe them to act either as one faster drive or as a drive that will back up data to it. So if one of the drives fails, you have an exact mirrored backup. It's all personal preference. I prefer RAID 0, RAID 5 for speed, so I'm getting more speed off my drives because I have things stored and backed up elsewhere. But if you have one drive, let's say you're doing a same-day edit on a wedding, if you have one drive and that's the only copy of that footage, you might want to let that drive be a RAID 1 so it's redundant. And this way, God forbid it goes down, you still have all your data. Personal preference. A lot of the things that we're going to cover in this course really come down to personal preference. I'm going to show you my methods and what I do, but there's going to be a lot of people go, well, I do it this way. Is there any benefit or a con to that? It just all depends on the situation. But we'll try to address those if we can.
Okay. Which again is a reiteration that to head to the chat rooms, creativelive.com/chat, and just chat about your different methods. There are a million ways to interpret, I think, this program, and we know that you guys are out there and have your own opinions, so you can chat about it. Frank P. asks, when I have a lot of events showing in the top left window, is there a good way to get rid of them from that window without moving to the trash so I don't lose them for good?
Okay, that is a very, very good question. Okay, so over here in the event library, you'll see that I have 5 events. Each of these events are pertinent to the program I'm going to be teaching you here over the next 3 days. If one of these were not, and let's say one of them were an event, it's just a project that I'm working on in my studio for a client, and I didn't really want to air their dirty laundry or their video clips here online, I can hide that event using a program called Event Manager. Okay, you can download it in the App Store. It does cost, I think it's like $5 or something like that. But what Event Manager will do, and I don't have a copy of it on this program, on this system, but it'll allow you to hide the events you don't want to see on your hard drive. Because remember, any hard drive that I plug in while Final Cut's running, or if I open Final Cut, it's going to show me all of those hard drives and any events that are on them. It's not going to be discriminatory. It's not going to say, well, which events do you want to see? It's just going to flat out show me everything that's on there.
So it can get messy. Yeah.
It can get messy and confusing. So Event Manager will allow you to hide them temporarily. But if let's say you do use Event Manager to hide certain events, and then you unplug that drive from your computer and then go put it on my computer, and I don't have Event Manager installed, I'm not going to be able to re-show. I'm not going to be able to, enable those hidden. I'm not going to be able to see those events that I've hidden. So while it's good, you want to make sure that if you're moving your media drives from terminal to terminal, that you have Event Manager installed on all 3.
Great. And this was from a little bit earlier this morning. Photographic Elements asked, what do you do when the heap is too big to render a project? I've been moving stuff out, but they said, I think you just said not to do that.
Not sure I quite follow. He's saying that the project is too big to render? Is that what he's saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah, rendering is a whole thing we're going to get into. What I would say at this point is check your system configuration. I mean, faster systems are going to handle rendering a lot differently. One of the quick fixes I find is if I run into render issues or if Final Cut Pro 10 is giving me bad renders or for whatever reason, there is a dialog. If I select the project here in my project library, and let's say I have rendered files, let's say I've rendered video in this project, they're stored in the Final Cut event or Final Cut projects folder, all of those rendered files. So every frame of video becomes a render file, basically, or a part of a render file. And they get corrupted fairly easily. So if you wanted to just restart without losing your work, obviously you're not backtracking any of your editing, but if you just want to wipe out those render files and let Final Cut redo it to maybe iron out any problems, I can come up here to my file window, go down to delete project render files, and it'll wipe out the render files. And then I can go back in and let it re-render, and that sometimes solves some problems. So yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that if they have really long timelines, like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and they're trying to render it all out, they run into problems. I would say go with a faster system. Go with a beefier system that can handle that much more data. Remember, I mean, Final Cut Pro is an application. It's not a supercomputer. It's going to be limited as to what it can do. So the more resource you give it to work with, meaning more RAM and more processing power, the more success you're going to have with problems like that.
You had a question from one of the students?
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I was just wondering, for people who might have the option of multiple screens, is there a way to use those?
That's a great question, and this is a great time to actually go up into our preferences menu up here in Final Cut Pro 10. Man, that's a good segue. Thank you. I like questions that lead into good segues. If I just come up here to my Final Cut Pro tab within the application and click on Preferences, this is a place to optimize your system even further to make it perform maybe a little bit better for you. There's 4 distinct tabs up here at the top of our Preferences panel. The first is Editing, and I'm going to get to your question in a second. So the first thing we have here is Time Display. This is going to display our time units in hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, which is standard for video editing. We have 2 options here for timelines, our project timelines. We can either show detailed trimming feedback, which means when I trim clips on my timeline, again, something we're going to get into in the very near future, it'll give me more information about the time and just detailed information there. Position playhead after edit operation. We'll get to that. Inspector units. We're looking, when I look over here in my inspector window and I move a video clip, it's going to give me a range of pixels or a readout of pixels. Like you're going to move this how many pixels or what range of pixels do you want to move it? That's where we set that. Audio, we can display whether or not we want to show reference waveforms, meaning on our video clips. Do we want to see the waveforms there or not? Still images, if we import a still image into the program, how long do we want that still image to be by default if I drop it down on my timeline? 4 seconds is the default. Transitioning between two clips, if I put a dissolve from one clip to another, 1 second is the default there. Okay, so playback. Your question was, and I'm going to skip down to the bottom here to answer your question. If you have an external monitor that you want to hook up to your system, so you have a dual monitor configuration or multiple monitors, come down here to AV output, and if you have something connected via Thunderbolt or USB or however else, serial port, it should detect it in this menu. And the model of that display should show up here. And then you can select that, and what it'll do is give you options to move some of your windows over to that. You can do like an extended desktop view, or you can just drag one window over. Like I would drag over, when I work with a multiple monitor setup, I would bring over my project viewer, this window here, and drag that over, make it full screen, and I can watch what I'm doing full screen. I think the program by default will actually put this over there for you. So, all right, cool. So here we're in the playback tab, and I just kind of explained the AV output. This is a really key thing here up at the top. It says rendering, background render. If I have this option checked, anything I do in my projects, any effects that I apply or any changes I make that require rendering, Final Cut Pro 10 will do it while, when I stop working, Final Cut will start rendering, basically. It's background rendering, but it really only does it when you stop and pause for a second. So if I'm working in the timeline and I stop for a second to take a drink of water, it's going to start rendering. If I walk away to go use the bathroom and come back, it's rendering. Okay, so it's maximizing my downtime to do things that I would have to eventually do later on in legacy versions of Final Cut. So that's really powerful. There are times you may want to turn it off, and this is how you would do it. Okay, you can designate, okay, after 5 or 6 seconds is when you can start. We're going to get into transcode this playback transcode stuff in a future segment, because that's really important. By default, though, if you are new to Final Cut Pro 10, and this is the first time you're using it, you're going to want to set your playback quality to better performance. Okay, we don't need to see, while we're editing, our clips in 100% high quality. Okay. Later on, if you want to check the quality of something, you can switch over to this, but it's going to slow your system down considerably if you're trying to do all of your edit operations and playback real time in high quality. So switch that over to better performance. That's a key thing. All right? We're going to get into these other ones also. One thing I would suggest, if you're on an older system and you're not sure whether or not Final Cut Pro 10 is playing your video back optimally, check these two boxes. Warn when dropping frames during playback, and warn when frames are dropped due to hard disk performance. So if you play back something down here in your project timeline and it's stuttering and it's not playing back smooth, if you're dropping frames, meaning the video card and the processor is not keeping up with the real-time playback, it'll warn you. Hey, you know what? Just want to let you know we're dropping frames. Or the program might say, hey, we think that you might have a hard drive issue. And that's why the second box is checked. If you play back and it's choppy and it drops frames, and the program analyzes it and thinks that it's because the hard drive can't keep up, because remember, your hard drive spins unless it's a solid state, it'll tell you, hey, you might have a hard drive issue. So that's good. If you're a little unsure about your system, check those two boxes.